Hello friends and welcome. I'm Sarah Liz and I am back with another Spellbinders Club Kit video. This one has a printable that goes with it. We have Christmas in July sentiments, in circle sentiments, rectangle sentiments, and strip sentiments, along with a card sketch in this one. The kit actually released yesterday, so I will link to that video if you want to see a slower walkthrough of all of those sentiments, but it is available here as well. If you are interested in this free kit, all I ask is that you subscribe to my channel, then ring that bell so you'll be notified every time there's a new free kit. We are starting off using the large die of the month. It's meant to make this snowy birdhouse, but you guys, it's July and I cannot even think about snow. It makes me sad. So we're gonna modify this birdhouse and it's gonna be for any not snowy time of the year. I'm using just a little bit of light blue ink over the different pieces for the bottom of the house because I like how it brings out the wood grain. There's some debossing, but there's also some cut lines, so you've got variation in that texture throughout. Then we have a long branch that we can tie our birdhouse to, and I'll do the same there, again, just because it brings out that texture. I'm going to show you how I modified the roof, and then I'll explain how you can do it easier. Really, it's on the bottom and then this side right here, where the pencil line is really helpful. I'm just trying to remove the curve that's happening that is sort of created by that snow. So I'm going to cut right here. Okay, I'm just lining it up and eyeballing it, and then I'll cut right here. Those are the two most important cuts. The other two, you actually want to wait to cut until you've put the two other layering pieces on top of this roof. So here's one of them, and it tucks right against that inside. So this is my darkest piece. I actually cut all three from the same blue cardstock and then just ink blended over top of these other two pieces to create that dimension. I didn't have three shades in this blue. Then I can add this second piece, and it's going to line up butting right up against that darkest piece and meeting at the peak, and then exactly along the inside of the right side of the roof. I'm also going to trim off this little dip. You could just do all of that ahead of time and then start trimming, but I'm going to start assembling and I'm going to go, you know what, something looks weird here. I have a second piece to the base of the birdhouse, and then right along the roof here, you put two little lines of glue. There's a debossed line to show you where that goes. And there are little debossed lines towards the bottom right of the roof, okay, but on the light blue piece. So you can see just a little bit of that hanging out from where we trimmed, but only if you're really looking for it. But that part I just pointed to, that looks weird. It just looks weird to me. So I trimmed it off after looking at 20,000 photos of birdhouses online. I was like, you can't see that part of the roof from this angle. So I'm going to trim that. And then I have to trim off a little bit more at the top because it got kind of tall. So I'm using my pencil. You could certainly eyeball that, but this just works better for me. And then I can erase it if I have too much pencil there. And I'm really happy with how that roof turned out. These are the little birds, you guys. I didn't think I was going to like the birds. I thought they looked weird. They're supposed to be cardinals. You could easily turn them into blue jays. You can see just above my finger there, there's a sort of triangle piece that is, I don't even know what to call it. If you know, put it in the comments. But the spiky part, the mohawk on the cardinals and the blue jays, right? You can leave that off. And I have left it off on every card I've made using these birds. And I think there's like 4 cards, like you guys. I love how whimsical they are, and they're quite small, right? Not so small that they're hard to assemble. I don't feel like the pieces are tiny, but these are about the same size as like a critter stamp would be. And so they are interchangeable with so many different things I might use stamped images for. I would wait to put the legs on until my card was almost done, until I was like, this is definitely where the birds go. And so I know if they're in flight or if they're perched on something, because it changes how much of the leg you should be able to see. This is the Efflorescent Flora 3D embossing folder. I'm always mispronouncing that, so I did my best. I linked it below. I love it. I just used some white shimmer cardstock. It is from a previous club. So I guess I could have put this in the club remix video, but I really wanted to show you the birdhouse in this first one. If you are new to my channel, I do 3 videos a month with the Spellbinders Club kits. The first of the month, I do a quick like sneak peek of my printable kit and of some of the cards that I've made. Then on club release day, so on the 6th, I do a video where I make cards mostly using just the clubs, right? If you haven't gotten the clubs before, these are great. Or if you're just looking for inspiration, hi, I'm Sarah. I'm happy to have you. But then later in the month, I do a club remix. This is something new, much requested, and I have so much fun with it. I try to mix the current clubs with the past clubs, because if you're like me, you got those clubs and then now they're just sitting in a drawer. They just are. And it makes me super sad because the clubs are some of my favorite die sets. I mean, and embossing folders and stencils, right? That I get. And so I wanted to breathe some new life into them. If you get to that video and you're like, yeah, but I don't have the past clubs, that's okay. I do my very best to walk you through alternatives to those clubs. And if you're patient, you can get past clubs at a really good price. I myself am a bargain shopper. I don't want to pay full price for something if I can get it on sale. And so I also do sales videos occasionally on the channel, mostly to help you find my favorite products that are going to show up in videos again, but at a discount. So while I was chatting about all of that, I assembled everything onto my card panel. Nothing really complicated there. And then I have added it to a piece of navy cardstock that is ever so slightly bigger. This is a 5x7 card, by the way. So the white panel is 4x6, and then the navy is 4 1/8 by 6 1/8. I thought I was gonna be done. I was gonna do a really simple card, but there was white space and I don't deal well with that. So this is one of those die sets that I pull out over and over and over again. And it is the birthday wreath add-on. And then because I was feeling a little extra, I grabbed this other club called Balloons and Birthday Wishes that has like balloon strings in it. Totally not necessary. You could use actual string. You could cut little slivers of cardstock, but I had it and I'm making a club video. So I used it. I am just trimming off some of these streamers. They're really long, which I like. They're pretty easy to trim and they don't look like you trimmed them. No big deal. So 3 of those and then these 2 balloons, and I am going to glue them together so I can deal with them as a single piece. That is always easier for me. And then I will glue the strings onto the balloons, again, single piece, and that works pretty well. So I'm just looking for 2 that make it easy for them to sort of overlap right where they're going to hit that birdhouse. And I will end up using my pokey tool just to create a little pocket of space so I can tuck those right behind my birdhouse without causing problems. A little glue on the back of everything. I like to tap that off on the back of my hand if it's a really skinny piece of cardstock, but you could use scratch paper, you could use like a silicone mat, any of those things would work. For a sentiment for this first card, we're not making a Christmas card. So this is the Birds of Paradise sentiments that came out in May with all of those tropical birds. I will link to that video if you're interested in that kit. And it is full of funny, punny, sassy sentiments. I am just trimming it so I can see the tick marks on either side. And then I connect those tick marks on the blade of my trimmer so I know I'm cutting it straight. And it's going to be about a 1/4 inch when it's done. Then I will layer that on top of a 3/8 inch strip of cardstock. I'll try to create an equal margin on the top, bottom, and left. And then I'll trim off the right-hand side until it matches. And that's my sentiment. Super easy. Flappy flippin' bird day. And I just think it's really funny. I'm going to use some removable adhesive and add that sentiment in case I want to change it later. Maybe it's going to someone not so sassy, but I thought that was a lot of fun. For card number 2, we're using the stencil of the month, and it's going to be this gift package, and then it will have this holly berry background. I'm using craft cardstock and spun sugar oxide ink and some domed foam blenders. There are 2 layers to the ribbon and bow. I'm using oxide, so I could layer the light one on top of the dark if I wanted, and it would look lighter on top. But if you're using dye inks, just make sure your lighter ink is in the background and that when those 2 colors mix, it's not mud. So that was spun sugar on the bottom and then picked raspberry. And this is the piece that comes out of that first stencil. And I'm going to layer this mask right on top. I'm putting tape all the way at the edges. And then this is on top of my Waffle Flower grip mat. This is the one that fits in the Misty, though I rarely put mine in a Misty. My grip mat is in desperate need of a good cleaning, and so my stencil isn't sticking as well as normal along the edges. There is a good 1/4 inch on every side. It should stick just fine. But it's got some like mica powder on it. So my stencil shifted there, and I have a little bit of like double inking in some spots. It's going to be fine. I'm going to finish this card panel. I was actually stenciling a second one at the same time. But I am going to tape down my stencils for the rest of this. I'm coming in with pine needles for this next layer, and I am just going to wipe off some of that ink. On my other panel, I'm using cracked pistachio, which is a little bit lighter, so I didn't want too much ink sitting there. In between layers, I'm coming in with my cloth and sort of removing ink from the mask over the bow and ribbon, so I'm not contaminating my ink pads. For this one, it's the berries, and I decided to get a little different. So we have peacock feathers, and then this is mint pearl powder. It's a lot like Perfect Pearls, but the bottles are bigger. And I am just tapping that into the holes. I'm being really careful. This is how I end up with pigment powder on my grip mats that keep them from being super sticky. They tell you not to do that. So don't use pearl powder on your grip mat, and if you do, make sure you're cleaning it really, really well with soap and water, and then it'll be fine. So that's my first panel. Here's the second one, and I did Glacier Cardstock, which has been back in stock. It is this pale, pale blue from Spellbinders, and it was out of stock at the Weekender event, and it had been for months, and people were like, what do you mean? And now all of a sudden, it's sort of back in some of the shops, so I will try to link to that as well. On this one, I wanted to make that bow really fancy. So I'm using some Dina Wakley matte medium gel, but really any gel would work as long as it dries not tacky. And this is pretty easy over the ribbon parts, but right in the center where there's that big open space, it was a little bit challenging to get everything level. You do see dips and valleys in that paste, even if you put glitter on it. So something to be aware of. But then I'm going to go over this with Distress Rock Candy Glitter. It is clear mica flakes, really tiny glitter sized mica flakes with no color in them at all, no iridescence. It just looks like sugar or snow. And it's really the only glitter I own. So, so we went for it. Off camera, I trimmed that panel to 4 by 5 1/4. It will stencil a full A2 panel. But if you're off just a little bit, you can clean that up by trimming it down, and then it's just going to leave this little bit of a border around my card. For this blue panel, I'm going to use the Christmas and July sentiments, and I'm just trimming them, again, connecting those tick marks. This one's going to say Happy Holidays. We're going to keep it super, super simple, and I'm going to add it onto that same teal cardstock that I used behind my panel. Then I can trim off that right-hand side and I get a perfect sentiment mat every single time. If you make a lot of Christmas cards and you are interested in more Christmas kits, I will link to last year's Christmas videos and Christmas kits, and stay tuned. Coming up, I think in August, I can make an announcement to give you the place and time. I've been telling people I'm putting together a mega kit for a free event that I'm teaching in. So the event is free and the mega kit will be free, but it is exclusive to the event. So keep an eye out for that. I'm really excited about it. On this second panel, once again, I've trimmed it down. And actually, you guys, I'm looking at it. I think I did 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. That's a really tiny margin around the outside edge. Sorry about that. And then I have my rectangle sentiments. Again, we have tick marks, but here I'm going to go from the top tick mark to the bottom, and I am not cutting all the way through. I'm stopping when I get to that header, so I have flaps. Then I can rotate, and I will connect the tick marks on the side, and these are going to be perfectly sized. By the time I cut them out, they are 1 1/4 by 2 1/4, and I will put them on a mat that's 1 1/2 by 2 1/2. The mat I glued on there, but this I will add on with removable adhesive. It says dashing through the no. It's kind of how I feel about Christmas right now. I am not ready, right? I usually get to go to the beach at some point during the summer. I haven't gotten to do that yet. We cannot really be talking about Christmas. If you are sitting here going, Sarah, what are we doing? Why are we Christmas and Julying? Because it's fun. Because there are lots of us that do start early, but I promise there will be lots of non-Christmas between now and then. There will be a second kit released on my channel sometime in the fall. So if you have requests for Christmas sentiments or other fall holiday sentiments, especially if you're interested in like religious Christmas sentiments, I am not great at those. Go ahead and put those in the comments below. When you guys leave comments, I go through and I tally all the requests by theme, and I keep track of the sentiment wording that you've given me. I do my best to incorporate what I can, especially if there's like multiple requests for something. So while I was blabbing away, we started a whole nother card. Friends, this is the 3D embossing folder of the month, and it is beautiful. I knew I wanted color on this, but I didn't have it in me to color an entire panel. Like I cannot. So I went in and masked off a 1 1/4 inch strip, added some darker ink, embossed it, masked it off again, and went over it with white pigment ink. Skip the white pigment ink. It caused me problems here. So I masked things off again, and this time I have little pieces covering up the pine cones and the berries, and I'm using pine needles and going over really just the pine needles. I'm getting a little in the background, but that does not bother me at all. I will lift all of that off, and then I'm going to go add color only in that strip to the pine cones and the berries. But what happened is that because I have so much white pigment ink back there, that ink ends up contaminating my walnut stain and then my brushed corduroy here, and they end up way too light. I'll show you how I fixed it, but honestly, you wouldn't need to fix it if you had just skipped the white pigment ink, and by you, I mean me. I'm using my Spellbinders water brush. This is the fine tip one. They come in a 3-pack, and so there's 3 different sizes of brushes. I've got a little bit of water in there, but I also just have some water on my acrylic block. That's a stamping block. It's nothing fancy. The pine cones are mostly walnut stain, right? It's that nice, deep, rich cocoa brown. And then at the very top, I added a little brushed corduroy, but only a little. For the berries, these are my pearl colors. It is an opaque metallic watercolor. And so I only have just a little bit of water in there. And sometimes that means that the paint is really thick on my brush. I have a number 10 brush, and I tap it off on like a piece of scratch paper over there. And then I color in just the berries. That covered the white pigment ink just fine. But you can see my pine cones here. They're really white, sort of ghostly, sickly. You guys, I was so sad. I thought for sure I was starting over. So then these are the same brand of watercolors, but this is my gold palette. I'll link these below. I think it's called the Starry Colors. And I did a really light wash of that gold ink all over, okay? I've got a lot of water in there. I just want the gold to settle in to those valleys. I have one pine cone here that I haven't fixed. I let everything dry, and when I came back, they were very white again. So I just pulled out my alcohol markers. So I am going to use mostly my darker brown marker, and I am going in and pulling from the top of the valleys and flicking down. But you probably could just go all over, right? Try not to get it in the deepest of the valleys, because that's where I had that gold paint, and I really wanted that to show. We're going to pop out that gold paint by putting a matte of gold mirror cardstock on my card. This is my sort of cheap economy pack of gold cardstock. So I don't mind using an A2 panel, where if it's like the brushed gold from Spellbinders, which is amazing, I hoard that business. I would have cut the middle out of it. So please don't think I'm going around wasting my good cardstock. I'm going to go ahead and add that on with some wet glue, and then we'll bring in our strip sentiments again. And we're going to have another one that is just pretty simple. So I have cut it so I have tick marks on either side, and then I lined them up on my blade by eye because my printer gets crooked sometimes. Then I do this rotate flip situation so that bottom right hand corner is exactly 90 degrees, and then I can very quickly go through and cut the rest of them, just sliding them along that shelf at the bottom. This one says, may your days be merry and bright. And I have this little scrap of some iridescent pink cardstock, and it's beautiful. And it really kind of matches that metallic watercolor that I used on the berries. So same trick again, same margin on the top, bottom, and left, trim it off so it matches on the right. And then I have some just plain pink cardstock that was close-ish that I am gonna glue behind it. It's a 3/8 inch strip. And so if I'm gonna layer it up, I try to cut that other layer ever so slightly smaller so I don't have to worry about it, because I don't need any more stress in my life. I've got this too thick mostly because there's a lot of texture in that embossing folder, and it's gonna lay nicely if there's a couple layers. A little bit of wet glue, and I'm looking at it going, I really wish I had put that slightly higher. So we're gonna move it, and you know what? You can't tell. And that will finish up card number 4, my friends. I hope these cards inspire you to jump right into your clubs. If you don't get the clubs, that's okay. This kit mixes beautifully with tons of your other Christmas supplies. I will link to all the videos that I've talked about below, and the clubs and all of the other inspiration. If you're interested in the free download, all I ask is that you subscribe to my channel. So click that button and ring the bell to be notified every time there's a new free kit. And be sure to join us back later in the month for the club remix. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I will see you next time.